The house was too quiet for an argument. Marble floors, tall ceilings, walls lined with framed business awards and family portraits that all looked the same. Stiff smiles, tailored suits, perfection carefully arranged. At the centre of the living room stood Richard Cole, billionaire, investor, patriarch, a man who believed respect was earned through control. Across from him stood his son, Daniel Cole, 22 years old, hands clenched at his sides. He wore a simple jacket, nothing designer, nothing flashy, already a disappointment in his father's eyes. "This is not negotiable," Richard said coldly. "You will join the company." Daniel shook his head. "I won't." The words echoed louder than Daniel expected. Richard's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a game? I built this empire for you." "You built it for yourself," Daniel replied quietly. "I want my own life." Richard laughed once, sharp, humourless. "Your own life?" he scoffed. "Without my money? Without my name?" Daniel swallowed. "Yes." Silence fell. Richard stepped closer, towering over him. "You think passion pays bills? You think ideals survive the real world?" Daniel met his father's gaze. "I'd rather fail as myself than succeed as you." That did it. Richard's face hardened into something final. "If you walk out that door," he said slowly, "you are no longer my son." Daniel's breath caught. "You'll get nothing," Richard continued. "No money, no connections, no safety net." Daniel glanced around the room one last time, at the life that had always felt like a cage. "I understand," he said. Richard turned away. "Then go." Daniel walked to the door. His hand rested on the handle for a moment longer than he wanted, not because he doubted his choice, but because he knew what it would cost. Behind him, Richard spoke one last time. "Don't come back." The door closed. Outside, the city noise rushed in, horns, voices, life without protection. Daniel stood on the sidewalk with a single backpack and no plan. No inheritance, no name, no father. Across the street, the glass tower of Coal Industries reflected the sun, untouchable, permanent. Or so Richard believed. Daniel adjusted the strap on his backpack and took his first step forward. He didn't know how long it would take, he didn't know how hard it would be, but he knew one thing. One day, the man who disowned him would need something money couldn't buy. And when that day came, the real test would not be about wealth, but about forgiveness. Daniel's first night alone was spent on a friend's couch. Not a penthouse, not a guest room. A narrow sofa in a cramped apartment that smelled like instant noodles and laundry detergent. He stared at the ceiling until morning. For the first time in his life, there was no assistant to call. No credit card without limits, no last name that opened doors. When he checked his bank account, the number was almost insulting. $300. That was it. The next weeks were brutal. Daniel applied everywhere. Cafes, warehouses, construction sites. The moment employers recognized his last name, reactions shifted. "Any relation to Richard Cole?" "Yes." "Oh, then why are you here?" Some laughed, some grew suspicious, some assumed he was slumming for attention. Eventually, he stopped using his last name. He became just Daniel. He worked mornings unloading trucks, afternoons delivering food, nights cleaning offices, including, once, the lower floors of a building owned by his father's company. He kept his head down and didn't look at the logos on the walls. Pride burned, but hunger burned more. There were nights he skipped dinner to save money, mornings when his hands shook from exhaustion, friends drifted away when he couldn't keep up with their lives. And yet, something unexpected happened. Daniel learned. He learned how systems really worked, how workers were treated, how decisions made in glass offices affected people on concrete floors. He listened more than he spoke. One night, while cleaning an office after hours, he found a discarded proposal in the trash. A startup pitch written by a junior analyst, rejected without review. Daniel read it slowly. It was good, not flashy, not safe, but smart. He tracked down the analyst weeks later and asked questions. Then more questions. Then started helping, not with money, but with strategy, structure, clarity. Soon, others joined. They met in cheap diners and borrowed conference rooms. Daniel used what he had always absorbed but never appreciated, an understanding of markets, risk, and people, without the arrogance he had grown up around. They failed once, then again. But each time, Daniel stood back up. 5 years passed. Daniel no longer cleaned offices. He ran a small but growing firm focused on ethical investments and worker-owned startups. No skyscraper, no headlines, but real results. And one afternoon, as Daniel reviewed contracts in his modest office, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it. Then he answered. "Daniel Cole?" a voice asked carefully. "Yes." "This is a representative from Cole Industries. We're calling regarding your father." Daniel closed his eyes. The day had come sooner than he expected. "Richard Cole is in trouble," the voice continued, "and he has specifically asked for you." Daniel said nothing. 5 years ago, his father had said, "Don't come back." Now, the world had turned. And the man who believed money was everything was about to learn what it meant to need the son he once threw away. Still didn't go back right away, oh. He sat in his office long after the call ended, staring at the wall where sunlight cut across a stack of folders labelled Community Ventures and Employee Equity. The life he had built was quiet, intentional, nothing like the empire his father worshipped, and yet his father's name still had weight. Cole Industries was in trouble, not rumours, not gossip, real trouble. When Daniel finally agreed to meet, it wasn't at the mansion. It was at a private hospital wing overlooking the city. Richard Cole looked smaller, thinner, weaker. The man who had once filled every room with authority now lay propped up in a bed, machines humming softly around him. His hair was grey, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to sit straighter when Daniel entered. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Richard broke the silence. "You look different," he said. Daniel nodded. "So do you." Richard exhaled sharply. "I won't waste time. The company is collapsing." Daniel remained standing. "I know. Regulatory investigations, frozen assets, a failed acquisition built on shortcuts Richard had once dismissed as necessary risks. The board was divided. Investors were fleeing." "And you think I can fix it?" Daniel asked. Richard swallowed. "You understand things I never did. People, consequences." Daniel almost laughed, but didn't. "You disowned me," he said quietly. "You said I was nothing without your money." Richard's eyes dropped. "I was wrong," he said, "and now I need you." The words were harder for Richard than any financial loss. Daniel walked to the window and looked out at the city, the same city he had walked through 5 years earlier with a backpack and nothing else. "What exactly do you want?" Daniel asked. Richard's voice was strained. "I need someone the board will trust, but who won't repeat my mistakes." Daniel turned back to him. "You're asking me to clean up your legacy," he said. Richard nodded once. Silence stretched between them. Daniel felt the old anger rise, not loud, not explosive, but deep and heavy. The memory of the door closing, of hunger, of learning to survive without a safety net. "I'll help," Daniel said finally. Richard looked up sharply. "You will?" "But not for you," Daniel continued. "For the people your decisions affect." Richard's shoulders sagged, relief mixed with shame. "And this time," Daniel added, "I don't take orders." Richard nodded again. For the first time in his life, the billionaire had no leverage, and the son he had once disowned held all the power, not because he wanted it, but because he had learned how to carry it without becoming his father. Daniel stepped into Cole Industries the next morning without an escort. No announcement, no applause, just quiet recognition. People knew who he was and who he wasn't anymore. The boardroom felt familiar, but different. The same long table, the same city skyline outside the windows. What had changed were the faces, tense, guarded, afraid. Daniel listened, for hours. He didn't interrupt, didn't dominate, didn't perform authority the way his father always had. He asked questions others avoided, followed consequences all the way down to the people they touched. By the end of the day, the truth was unavoidable. Coal Industries wasn't failing because of bad luck. It was failing because of arrogance, risk hidden behind confidence, shortcuts justified as strategy, workers treated as expendable variables. Daniel stood. "We can save this," he said calmly, "but not the way it's been run." The room stiffened. "Assets will have to be sold," Daniel continued. "Executive bonuses frozen, departments restructured, transparency enforced." One board member scoffed. "That will destroy our image." Daniel met his gaze. "No, it will destroy illusions." That night, Daniel visited his father again. Richard watched him quietly. "They won't like you." Daniel nodded. "They don't have to." Over the next weeks, Daniel did what Richard never could. He took responsibility. He met with regulators instead of lawyers. He spoke to employees instead of issuing statements. He shut down divisions that existed only to inflate profits at human cost. The media noticed. Headlines shifted from collapse imminent to unexpected turnaround. But the hardest moment came late one evening in Richard's hospital room. Richard looked at Daniel and whispered, "I built everything, and nearly lost it all." Daniel sat beside him. "You built power, not trust." Richard's eyes filled. "And you built both." The words landed quietly. Because for the first time, Richard understood. His son hadn't succeeded despite losing everything. He had succeeded because of it. And as Coal Industries stabilized under Daniel's leadership, one truth became undeniable. The empire was being saved not by the man who created it, but by the son he once believed was unworthy to inherit it. Richard Coal passed away quietly 3 months later. No cameras, no press releases. Just a private service attended by family, a few long-time employees, and people whose lives had been shaped, for better or worse, by his decisions. Daniel stood at the back of the room. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In his father's will, there were no dramatic gestures, no apologies written in ink. Just a single amendment added in the final weeks of Richard's life. Control of Coal Industries is transferred to Daniel Coal. The board didn't object. They had already seen the difference. Under Daniel's leadership, the company changed in ways investors hadn't expected. Profits stabilized, but more importantly, trust returned. Workers gained representation, long-buried complaints were addressed, decisions slowed and improved. Daniel moved out of the mansion. He kept his small house, his simple routines. He refused the title visionary when journalists tried to give it to him. "I'm just fixing what was broken," he said. One evening, Daniel returned to the old house, not to live, but to close it. He walked through the silent rooms, past the marble floors and framed awards. In his father's office, he found something unexpected: a photograph. It showed Richard and a much younger Daniel standing side by side at a construction site. No suits, no walls, just sunlight and dust. On the back, in faded handwriting, were the words, "I didn't know how to say I was proud." Daniel sat down slowly. The anger he had carried for years loosened its grip, not because the past was erased, but because it no longer controlled him. Daniel locked the door behind him for the last time. The next day, he announced a new initiative. Coal Industries would invest exclusively in companies that shared ownership with their workers. When asked why, Daniel answered simply, "My father believed legacy was something you owned." He paused. "I believe it's something you leave better than you found it." Years later, Daniel would be remembered not as the heir who returned, but as the son who was strong enough to walk away and wise enough to come back without becoming the man who once disowned him. Because true wealth isn't measured in what you control, but in what you choose to forgive and transform.